All right, coming to you live here from DevOps Days 2025. How many of these have we been together, John?
Quite a few, man. I think I only missed a couple of ones during the pandemic, but we go back to the first days, and then yeah, this has been one of my homes for years. That I just feel like there's a couple of cities, Amsterdam, Austin, have always been sort of.
Weren't you at one just yesterday?
Yeah, last week, the beginning of this week, they did a DevOps Days Atlanta, which Chris Carian did a roast of me, which I told him he was crazy. He told me about it in Antwerp with the 15-year anniversary that he was going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a sidebar. There's been a discussion of should we rename DevOps, and that was a discussion there, DevOps Days, and he was like, you know what, I don't know, but why don't we do this? And he came up with like this idea of a Deming Day and roast John Willis. So it was awesome. Yeah, yeah.
So speaking of Deming, that's a book that you wrote recently,
Wow.
and your book writing days go all the way back to DevOps Handbook. Did anything before that?
Yeah, no, I did a bunch of work, and it worked for IBM, but I built like companies around their portfolios in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. So I've done about like 8 or 9, probably 7 or 8, what they call IBM Red Books. So I've got a whole catalog of Red Books, and then, but yeah, the DevOps Handbook was probably my first book in anger, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then since then this book that I've just created. Yeah,
We'll talk about
yeah,
that in just a second.
is all count 13, my 13th book.
Lucky 13.
Yeah.
All right, so here we are. Rebels of Reason, The Long Road from Aristotle to ChatGPT and AI's Heroes Who Kept the Faith.
Yeah.
So what was the thought? Where did you get the idea that, hey, I need to write a book about AI?
So this is kind of a funny story. So at Amazon re:Invent, not last year, but the year before, I was doing some work for MongoDB for Peter Ulander. We own Peter, right? So I was helping him out, and so they invited me here, and they had a cafe, and I met the cafe was good. Got to meet all of my meetings there, right? And a guy who I've known for years, like a quant trader, but very technical, was building his own fund, and he wanted to pick my brains about like Kubernetes and like best practices, who to meet. I wasn't going to build it for him, but I was going to help guide him where to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just started talking about what was going on in AI, and he just started talking about how PyTorch has been really good to him, and I realized, I had taken a course on TensorFlow, and I didn't like it, did not like it at all, and I thought, but I probably should like peek a little bit deeper into the PyTorch. So on the flight home, I looked, and it was sort of boring as well, right? Because I've learned now over the years to do training models and stuff like that, because I have to be sort of an expert. Back then, I had no interest in training a model and learning back propagation. But then what I found quickly is the thing I love about writing a book is the guy who basically was the genesis of PyTorch had an amazing backstory.
Mm.
And it's in the book, but like he's in India. He's a genius coder, but he can't pass the 1% test because he doesn't have a physics or chemistry background. Lucks out, comes to America onto a CMU, Carnegie Mellon program, meets Jan LeCun, winds up going to work with, studying on the LeCun at NYU. The rest is history. Goes to Meta. He basically takes over the Torch project. Anyway, long story short. But then I'm like, I'm going to write a book with this guy. And I'm like, that's going to be a thin book.
Right.
And then I started thinking, well, wait a minute. Since I'm on this journey, let me go figure out who all these other knuckleheads are, right? And then it was like, okay, now there are all these people. And one thing I found about writing books too is I'm thinking about my next book already now because I love this process. But the way, and I try to model them after like a Michael Lewis. Like how would Michael Lewis, like the story, but very technical. Everybody wins. The technician wins. My mother-in-law wins, right? And but I think what he must do, and someday I'll get to meet him, and I'm going to ask him. I think he looks at a subject, and he looks at the tentacles around the subject. And if the tentacles are just as interesting as the subject, then he's got a book. And that's what I found in my last 2 books. Like that the tentacles around these people who created AI were like interesting, crazy, determined. They had all these everyone was a star. You heard the Walter Pitt story and everything, right?
The real Goodwill
Hunting, yeah. And so once I saw that, I was hooked, and like this is my book. So, and I will say this: when I finished my Deming book, I didn't think I could ever write a book that enjoyable. The process, the book, that proud of it. This is a 10x more interesting to me, even though I love my Deming. But this book is just I've had so much fun writing this book.
So to that point of tentacles, I think with the Deming book, it's more like a hub and spoke type topology, right? Because he's in the center, and then you
Yeah.
explore those. Whereas this is much more of a network topology because this
Yeah.
is individual. In fact, if you talk about how I guess Damon sort of got you thinking about how you should organize it around rebels.
Yeah, no, so what, so a couple of things there. Like one of the things I like, I'm not going to say I'm like as good or even close to like Michael Lewis. Anybody else can be a judge. I don't think I am. I don't think anybody would say that, but I love his style.
Hmm.
And so when I was writing the Deming book, even in the Deming book, you're right, it was sort of a hub and spoke, but there was a lot of characters popping up.
Hmm.
And I went and I did a napkin survey of like, Michael Lewis's books. And, if I remember right, it was on average 8 to 10 characters. And I
Okay.
thought, okay. And so I sort of tried to do something like that with my Deming book, figuring like too many characters, might make the book intolerable to the reader.
Right.
But with this book, I had 15 characters before I got to just in the last decade,
Hmm.
and so I already gave that up, right? That is going to be a lot of characters. And then, and that was okay. But then the idea was that it was going to be more of a subject. Like, let me tell you the story on touring.
Hmm.
Let me tell, and then you saw that I was able to build that by counting, thinking, learning, different
Right.
senses, right? But really, the original sort of arc or plot, and now sort of a subplot is humans' quest to create a thinking machine. And with the idea that ChatGPT, to my story I'm on, didn't just happen overnight. It
Right.
was at least 70, 80 years, arguably a couple of hundred years, depending on when you start. Boolean logic,
Hmm.
Babbage, Boole, all those guys, and Ada Lovelace. So so we're going down this thing, and these are great stories, and like I mean, and then then we ran into the timeline issue, so fix that. And then Damon's always been a great mentor. He was a great mentor in fact, my Deming book.
And just in case people don't
uh,
know who Damon Edwards is.
yeah, Damon Edwards was. We both started the U.S. based DevOps Days. We used to run DevOps Cafe. Still not dead yet, but we just haven't published one in like 3 years, 4 years now. But the he, in my Deming book, I was kind of done in like 1990 when he died, 93, and Gene was, not Gene, Damon said, it'd be interesting if you could tie Amazon's work. And so it was the last third of the book and it was so much. What was Tim Cook at Apple was a Deming guy. Uh, you know, Jeff Wilkie and Adam, like these were behind the scenes supply chain guys. They're
Oh,
all
it's interesting to that point because obviously Deming made his big name in Japan.
yeah,
He
yeah.
was he was sort of ignored here, and now it's the current generation,
Yeah,
Amazon, Tim Cook, who is
well,
now.
and even further now, the DevOps, are all sort of. But yeah, it was that generation was industrial engineering. You came out with like Six Sigma. You had all this stuff that you had to sort of figure out how to apply. And both Tim Cook and Jeff Wilkie were like, and what was really interesting in my other book. So I don't want to get back to this book, but which was they both had this interesting problem. They both worked for two companies that had to redefine supply chain.
Mm.
And what was interesting about them two as well is both of the founders were smart enough that they didn't know enough about it, that they brought these guys, Steve Jobs brought in Tim Cook and Bezos brought in Jeff Wilkie, and those guys revolutionized. I mean, I don't think we have those companies. Anyway, that was Damon set me off on it, and so same thing he did here. I kept telling him these stories, and he said, "John, it sounds like you're writing a book about rebels." And then I thought about, yes, I am. And then I thought, well, what is the what was the meta point or the subplot, which was reasoning?
Hmm.
And I thought, wow, and it rolls off your tongue. Rebels of reason, right? So yeah.
The alliteration, I think, is what really
Yeah,
sells
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah,
So it's interesting. One of the things you just gave your talk, you talked about is AIG. We're kind of looking at the wrong question there, right? So why are we trying to think of AI in terms of how we process things, how the human brain
yeah.
works?
That was the point that, like, when I wrote the epilogue, I was like, we've been on a quest to create a thinking machine. We've created one. What we forgot or we don't really address now is it's not a human thinking machine. It's a thinking machine. I think, I mean, if you want to debate, go find somebody else. But there's no doubt in my mind this is a alien cognition. And so I use the Arrival movie, and we were too far into sort of comparing. But the point is, when you're dealing in alien cognition, I will say, in the Arrival movie, the sort of the way we're dealing with alien cognition, which we call AI, like it would like in the movie, if the linguistic in the movie, who is Amy Adams, right, and plays this Dr. Banks, my sort of joke was, she'd go to the aliens and say, "Can you ride a bicycle?" You know, you know, how can you wash dishes? You can't wash dishes. This is, like, wait a minute, no, man, they might take over the whole earth. That's
Right.
not the conversation. And I'm not saying AI is going to take over. I'm not worried about that. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not saying it ain't happening. Just don't worry about it.
Right.
But what I'm saying is the reason she got the pay dirt to found that they were here to help us, because she took a scientific method, abductive reasoning approach, and she didn't do these stupid benchmark stuff about finding how well it does puzzles versus humans.
Mhm.
And that was the main point of the end of my presentations. Let's having an AGI conversation, I think, is a waste of oxygen. Artificial general intelligence, the implication that it's going to meet or exceed, meet human capability. What does that even mean? And why are we comparing apples to oranges? Because it's not a human, and it'll never be human, right? And we're biological beings. These are electrical machines, right? I mean, just go on and on. And anyway, long story short, I have this sort of rant about, let's deal with the way this Dr. Banks dealt with the aliens in the movie. Let's see if we can't learn how to communicate as opposed to how to sort of compare.
It's kind of like when the railroads came out and they put horses and carriages on the railroad tracks, saying, "Well, how do we make the railroads? I mean, the carriages faster?" And the whole thing is, no, 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 you're looking at it wrong.
Totally. No, I think, no. I mean, let's accept that this is a phenomenal alien cognition, and like we should be figuring out like what are the ways that make human cognition better. And like, I'm not Pollyanna, right? There are dragons all over the place, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm not saying that like bad things will happen. Really bad things might happen,
Mhm.
but like, but that a meteor could hit us right now too, right? Like, and so let's just be constructive. Let's act like scientists. My favorite quote in the book is that sort of Lockish quote, which says, in order to understand science, you have to understand the philosophy of science. And what he said to me, which is, in order to understand AI, you have to understand the philosophy of AI.
Mhm.
And to me, that's a can opener for the kind of discussions I think the collective we should be having.
Cool. So just to finish off with, and I'm afraid we'll probably find other questions along with this, but what surprised you in writing this book? What did you think one way, and then as you started looking into it, you thought, "Oh, wow."
Yeah, I mean, I kind of knew that, there's sort of this, I think it's John McCarthy's quote, but there's a lot of different people who sort of said it's somebody else's, which is they don't call, once you know how it works, they don't call it AI, right? Like, so it's sort of like the magic trick. It's not magic once you understand how it works, right? I knew that. So I wasn't like, like all the sort of evidence that showed that, like, it is just, I think it helped me in my day job as I'm helping clients sort of navigate either architectures or how to use it safely within an enterprise, how to do high consequence
Mhm.
applications with it. I think the thing I think like which is really enforced to me is these chat bots and these sort of services we're building in all these organizations right now is to remind CIOs that it's compute, network, and storage. And then even their most advanced chatbots are like probably, and this is my napkin math,
Mhm.
less than 10% AI, and 90% is applications, Redis and Kubernetes and Kafka and cloud native and cloud and network compute storage, all that stuff, right? So yes, it's phenomenal what the reasoning engines can do right now, but at the end of the day, let's not forget this is compute, fundamentally this is compute, network, storage. And I think it helped me ground that. I will say I've gotten compliments from like my editor and different people that they've said that this book helps them understand AI better as they use AI. And part of it might be it isn't magic.
Mhm.
It's math.
Right.
It's phenomenal. I mean, what the people in my book that created this stuff are alien-like geniuses.
Mhm.
I mean, just across the board. That's the beauty. That was the beauty of their stories. How I mean, Alan Turing played a computerized chess game against a friend before there were computers.
Oh, well.
I mean, like, I guess he was writing out bits and bytes on paper, playing chess with his friend. I mean,
Yeah.
that's alien.
He was playing 4D checkers, and we were all playing. We're playing
Totally.
4D chess, and we were playing checkers.
Big time. So to me, that. I know this, like, you get to see some brilliance in like, people are just, but to be able to see the spotlight of the connected dots
Mhm.
between anywhere from like Turing to Walter Pitts to, um, you know, John LeCun to Dennis Hassabak. Dennis Hassabak he's the deep mind guy, right?
Mhm.
At 4 years old, he beats his dad in chess. 3 or 4 years beats his dad in chess. At like 11 or 12, he's a chess master. At 13, he's sitting in a tournament realizing how much brain power is being wasted on chess, although he loves chess, he loves
Mhm.
games. And that, why won't take that power to cure cancer? Well, guess what happened last year? He won a Nobel Prize in protein folding.
Dang.
That literally is sort of the start of curing cancer, right? Like, yeah, he's the guy AlphaGo guy, right? So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think those stories were just the brilliance of these people and how just innate. Like, I mean, you, Walter Pitts said Norbert Wiener was, he was the youngest person to ever get into Harvard. He was a prodigy. But those people that are just sort of born with this, just alien-like intelligence is just amazing.
Awesome. So, Rebels of Reason, it's coming out on Monday.
No, it goes to print on Monday, and the plan is for it to be on June 5th. It should be audible on Amazon. June
All
5th.
right, you heard it here. All right, John Willis, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure doing these things over the years. We've done like
And
7, 8
and
of
we'll
these.
do and we'll do more. All right, thanks everybody.